You like that? You like that?
It's Waxing Lyrical, baby.
Hello, Waxers, and welcome to Waxing Lyrical with Mains and Dutch. I'm your host, Mains, and my colleague in the danger zone in Rainford. It's Mr. Neil Dutton. How are we, Neil?
I'm fine. Yourself?
I'm fine. Multitasking, as I had to do last night. Why I may as well say we did last night. Last night we got to speak to the incomparable, the absolutely fantastic friend of the show, friend of the stars now, Mr. Roto Pat, Patrick Doherty.
And what a beard.
Spectacular. That's a man who's embraced the lockdown beard. Cannot argue with his thoughts on it. We will have Roto Pat later in the show talking St. Louis, baseball, the lack of crowds, and Oasis.
And maybe a little bit of NFL talk.
And Neil is not exaggerating when he says a little bit of NFL talk. I think we asked multiple questions. He answered two of them on the NFL. The one he talked the most about was 6 minutes long, not about the NFL.
And I think it was a topic which I could offer absolutely no insight. So,
Before we get to Pat though, we're gonna do a couple of classic weird worlds. I love them both because they're both animal related, and that always adds an extra level of intrigue. Then we're gonna do some NFL news. We're gonna update on a story we did last week, which has gone gradually worse and spells doom for those wishing to be watching Scott Hanson on Red Zone come September. But we'll get to that later. First of all, Neil, let's do a little bit of Weird World. Neil, how about a story linked to, well, not linked, but basically Jerry Springer, but with goats? Yeah, you heard me right. Florida woman sues for paternity test on goats. Yeah. A Florida woman has filed a lawsuit seeking either a paternity test on her goats or a refund, and she is not kidding. Chris Hedstrom filed a suit against her neighbour Heather Dana last month seeking DNA for the goat she purchased. Hedstrom paid Dana $900 for 5 Nigerian dwarf goats in December. According to the lawsuit, Hedstrom believed the goats Bella, Gigi, Rosie, Zelda, and Margot, I think that's a play on words there, could be registered. Yeah, exactly. Could be registered with the American Dairy Goat Association. Yes, there is one of them. A group that records goat pedigrees. Registered goats have higher values than unregistered goats. Dana, who has been selling goats at Baxter Lane Farm for about 10 years, typically provides information to her clients so they can register their animals themselves. She said the father goat was registered, but the Tampa Bay Times, that's an actual big newspaper who's writing this story, by the way, tough times in Tampa Bay, reports the American Dairy Goat Association rejected Hedstrom's application to register the babies because Dana is not an active member. Proving paternity would require about 40 of the father goat's hair follicles for a DNA test. Dana offered to refund the money in exchange for the goats. She said Hedstrom called the police on her for 3 months straight and trespassed on her farm. And a deputy sheriff visited the property at least 3 times in the spring. I assume she's trespassing on the farm to find the father goat and take 40 hairs from his body for a DNA sample.
Does sound like a weird quest in some kind of Dungeons and Dragons game, doesn't it? You must bring me 40 hairs from the male goat. No, thank you, Warlock. I don't think I will.
Dungeons and Dragons, for those who aren't aware, is a game. You may have seen it in Stranger Things. For those who aren't aware, it was a thing people did before computers.
Yeah, it was also there was a kids' cartoon show based on the theme.
My understanding is there's going to be a TV show. There's going to be a TV show of that back again on our screens very soon. Yeah, well, I believe so.
Have you seen those like little memes the like Star Wars ones, where it's when basically an entire storyline can be cut out completely by just one character saying something, and then the last phrase is always story by George Lucas. So you want to do this 7 series, 10 series, Dungeons and Dragons, Game of Thrones type thing? Well, here's one way I can make it just one episode. The little bleating creature, and it died. Because the number of times in the Dungeons and Dragons cartoon, they come home, but the little was there. It's going to die.
Yeah.
Not your concern.
It's
nothing to do with you.
It's not. Next story, Neil. We move over to the West Coast to our guest last week. Justin's from San Francisco. Or Justin is now. He's not from there. He's from LA. A young mountain lion has been spotted sleeping in a planter box along a normally busy street and looking at his reflection in a glass of an office tower in downtown San Francisco. Let's just brace everyone. Like, San Francisco isn't in the middle of nowhere. It's a major metropolitan city. Why the frick is there a young mountain lion there? That is total and utter insanity. The disorientated cougar roamed the street for 2 days until he was spotted by a police officer near Oracle Park, home of the San Francisco Giants. Officers set up a perimeter and waited for the animal controller officers to arrive. They safely captured the 50-pound cat in an apartment building's green area with lots of shrubbery around without the use of sedatives. How did they catch it without making it go asleep? Did they fight it?
Yeah, I don't think this was a lion.
Campbell says officials get reports of cougars in San Francisco about once a year.
Cougars in San Francisco is one of those websites you probably shouldn't look up on the work computer.
I believe still to this day that the LA Chargers should have changed their name to the Los Angeles Cougars.
It was just too easy. It was an absolute layup, and they missed it.
I just think it's fantastic. The animal revolution is upon us. I suppose more than one cougar entering San Francisco once a year.
I just love the idea that this big cat was staring at its reflection. Just say the line again about it staring into its reflection. Say that line again.
Like, it just in an office building, it stared into its it was wandering aimlessly while staring into its reflection in an office building.
That sounds like a lyric from a Joni Mitchell song.
I just think it's just staring at its reflection, which it doesn't think is its reflection, going, there's 2 of us in this city? That is so cool. How are you doing?
Yeah.
Why are you not talking to me?
Yeah.
Ignorant
God.
cat.
Yeah. So rude, man. We've got to stick together.
As always, if you've got a weird world, please send them to me and Neil. We are at waxing_lyrical. Neil is at Endutton13 and I am at Mainsy7 if you need to send them individually. Neil, that's enough of that. Let's get on with some NFL news. First story, Dak Prescott signs contract. Let's be honest, he's probably signed a 3-year, $123 million contract with the Dallas Cowboys, unless he doesn't, and then he goes to free agency. Mm-hmm. Dak Prescott, big winner.
Big winner, and also as well, he has tied the Cowboys' hands behind their back, because we know that the salary cap is going to change. So we know that they are not financially secure from that. But what this does is this puts an end to any thinking they might have of, if Jadeveon Clowney or if someone like that, or Antonio Brown, I'm just spitballing, if a big name free agent, Jamal Adams, of course, they could, try and trade for him.
Yeah.
Well, you don't have the salary cap now because Dak has signed the tender. You can't rescind it now and say, we'll be fine with Andy Dalton. He's locked in now. So this season now assuming it goes, which let's not assume it, they go as Dak Prescott goes. So very clever to sign it. And as we've said in the past, we're not going to begrudge any player that wants to get paid. Get your money, Dak. But I would just draw people's attentions to Brett Coleman's work on his film channel. It's his channel on YouTube is called The Film Room. And his latest video is about Dak Prescott, about why he thinks Dak is likely to become the latest in a long list of good quarterbacks who were paid superstar money and basically crippled the rest of the franchise because they could not paper over all the cracks that were left when you pay your star quarterback and you haven't, and he's not a game changer completely. Very interesting.
Let's be honest. The issue with that, is there's multiple issues with it. I guess is there isn't really 32 NFL quarterbacks that exist on the planet, or exist in America anyway. And of them, how many can you say are elite? I don't know. 5 to 10 probably at any given stretch. And if you don't have one of them, like, you're just supposed to have no one. Like, it's a difficult situation to be in if you've got an okay quarterback. So, like, I know this from the Kirk Cousins experiment, right? Like, Kirk Cousins is an okay quarterback. With the right tools around him, he can win 10, 11 games and maybe, I don't know, win a couple of playoff games. And if things all play right, he could possibly win a Super Bowl. But there's got to be a lot of things that have to happen for that to happen. The issue becomes is he's a quarterback and you've defined him as franchise because you've kept him. So therefore he's paid like a franchise quarterback. Yeah.
Players, the brief summary, you should watch the video anyway because there are some good film examples of things that if you want to be paid $35 million a year to be a quarterback, these are plays you cannot make. The description used is there are quarterbacks who you can win a Super Bowl with if the talent around them is exceptional and tip-top. There are quarterbacks that you cannot win a Super Bowl with if you're overpaying your quarterback and therefore you have to scrimp everywhere else. Yeah. And you look at some of the players who the Cowboys could be forced to let go because their contracts are going to be up and they're not going to be able to afford them. They're not superstars, but you do have to have a 53-man roster.
Yeah.
And ideally, you'd prefer it not to be your quarterback, your running back, your wide receiver, your left tackle, and some blokes from a park.
Correct. It's tough. Like, and I don't have sympathy with the Dallas Cowboys. Why would I? But, I, as a person whose team's been in that situation recently, it's not easy. Do you know what I mean? It's not. Next story, Neil. The start of baby steps from a Washington franchise. They have announced this week that they are removing George Preston Marshall's name from the Ring of Fame at FedEx Field. Less than a week after his statue was removed from their former home. On Saturday, the team said it would retire Bobby Mitchell's number 49. In 1962, he became the first African-American player to play for the franchise under Marshall, and Marshall was the last owner to integrate his team. So yes, for those who aren't aware, not only do Washington have a racist name now, they've been racist for a very long time.
Yeah, George Preston Marshall's in the Hall of Fame for his deeds in the formation of the NFL and how it can transform it into what it is. He's also a racist prick who basically was a stain on the NFL. Such comments as, I'll hire a black player when the Harlem Globetrotters hired a white one. I'm sure that was hilarious 60 years ago. It's not funny now, and I highly doubt it was funny back then. Of course, Bobby Mitchell was, a Hall of Fame player with Washington. First black player to play for Washington, but not the first black player selected to play for Washington. That was Ernie Davis, who refused to play for George Preston Marshall because he didn't want to be the token black player. So he traded him to Cleveland to get Bobby Mitchell. Sadly, Ernie Davis died before he ever played an NFL snap. But Bobby Mitchell went on to, as I say, a Hall of Fame career. So, yeah, Washington don't retire player numbers. This is only the second they have after Sammy Baugh. So it's obviously a big step. Anything that removes a stain on your history and you remove it, you should be applauded for. Change your name.
Yeah, change your name. Let's just get over with now. Like, just change your name. I think
it's
it's
really that simple.
It is that simple. Do you know what I mean? It's not rocket science at this point. It's an offensive name. You may have believed it not to be an offensive name for 50 years or whatever, but guess what? It's an offensive name now. So change the offensive name. It's not get on with us. We were incorrect there as Adam Shelley, where certain restrictions are in place. Those restrictions don't occur everywhere, as we would talk with Pat. The three moments: California, Florida, where there are multiple felts.
But I was listening to the latest Roto Underworld pod with Matt Kelly and Peter Overzet, and the point they made is that you look at two of the teams with the youngest in the NFL are based in Florida. There's the Mines and the Jacksonville Jaguars, young players, maybe not as conscious, not as careful of their environment. When they're going out, basically not wearing a mask, not socially distancing. This is where all the training camps have been. All these players getting together to throw. He said, you've got to look at it that way and think there's a very good chance that Miami, the Dolphins and the Jaguars could get ravaged in the next few weeks with the players. We have to accept the fact that this pandemic, this virus, this cure, because humanity is actually the virus, but anyway, it doesn't give a shit that we want an NFL season.
No,
it doesn't care. It
couldn't care less. It couldn't care less. What it would care about if people actually followed some kind of guidelines that would stop it from spreading. However, multiple places, including the country we live in, have decided to give it a big FU to that. So people shouldn't be surprised in the States where they took, I guess, economy over health. The thousands upon thousands of people are now filling hospital beds in multiple states across the US.
Yeah. Give them bread and circuses and they will never revolt. So the pubs can reopen, you can get a haircut. Oh, look, the football's back. Yeah, you've mismanaged the situation, however, so... Oh, but I can get a pint. Oh, it's all right. All be forgiven.
Yeah, politics podcast probably later next week. Not on this feed, but will be a lot of swearing. Yeah, that is the NFL news for this week. That is us really for this week. Neil, before we slip over to speak to Pat and end the show, where can people catch you for the rest of the week?
Rest of the week, find me on the Twitter at NDutton13. This week I have had a couple of pieces out. I've had one on RotoViz about players that RotoViz rankers like a little bit more than drafters over at the FFPC. I also have had some pieces on my continuing series on Ravenswire on their upcoming opponents. This week, say it's already been released when they the Kansas City Chiefs. So it looks at past meetings, people who've had good games, the history of the rivalry, as it were. Interesting quirk. They've met 9 times in the regular season. The Chiefs won the first 3, the Ravens won the next 3, the Chiefs have won the last 3. So you'd have to say the Ravens are due. I also had a piece out on Ravenswire and also on Touchdown Wire, so the USA Today site, about Greg Roman, in his words, always rooting for Colin Kaepernick. So yeah, I've been busy whilst also working.
Awesome, Neil. Awesome. Well, that's it. I'm at 97. No new stuff from me. If things go well in the next 25 minutes and you don't like Liverpool Football Club, steer clear of my Twitter timeline. On that note, let's go back in time to yesterday to talk to Patrick Doherty about such things as empty stadia and Paul Weller and Oasis conspiracy theories. Here we are. And joining us now on Waxing Lyrical with Mains and Dutch, a returning guest, one of our favourites, senior NFL writer for Roto World, and now best friends with Kevin Clark of the Ringer NFL show, is Mr. Patrick Doherty. Patrick, how are we?
I'm very good. Yeah, I'm a celeb now. Been on the Ringer NFL podcast. So it's been, even with not many people going out because of coronavirus now, and I go out, the people who are out just mob me. So
the streets of St. Louis are filled with people.
States.
The streets of St. Louis are filled with people trying to get an interview from you, Patrick. I'm sure. I have to say, when it was like, I listened to the Tony Kornheiser show podcast. I used to listen to the radio show. Follow Washington, obviously, and he has this concept called the Tony Kornheiser moment when he's like, I know that guy, and I was like, and Ringer NFL show, and I'm like, that's Patrick. He's been on our show, and I'm like texting Neil, Patrick's on the, like, this is cool. Anyway, that's not why we're talking to you. And
it was really cool. Just yeah,
it looked. I mean, it was a really good show on the quarterbacks. It was really interesting. It was good stuff. I would recommend people to go and listen if you haven't. I don't want to talk about NFL at the moment. First thing I want to talk to you about is not your lockdown beard, but you're in St. Louis. For those who aren't aware, there's a small team in St. Louis called the Cardinals. They play baseball. The city lives and dies usually by it, although the St. Louis Blues took over, as we've talked about on a previous show. And billionaires and millionaires have decided to not play very nice in the world of not playing baseball. At the moment, I believe it looks like the owners are going to dictate to the players that they play 60 games. Is it? I follow it a little bit in terms of news. Is it as crazy as it sounds that even if they get this played, this could be not the end of baseball, but a serious impact for future negotiations?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, this in and of itself wouldn't be, because, people understand. It's the COVID year. Like, people knew it was going to be messed up. But yeah, the problem is, like, this is just kind of like the prelude to, like, the CBA negotiations next year, because the players really feel like they lost the past two negotiations, because they did. And so they kind of like they were using this as like their initial like line in the sand that like this time they're coming to play ball, they're not going to get rolled again. And yes, it speaks very ominously to after next season there could be like a lockout or a strike in the middle of the 2021 season. So yeah, I think people will forgive and forget fairly quickly with this season, because I mean, we are dying for, the Premier League's very popular in America now, but that's on during the day, that's on during the afternoon. Americans are dying for some primetime sports, and so we'll accept the baseball back, forgive and forget there. But yeah, it does not speak well to the state of the future negotiations. Like both sides are going to be playing for keeps next year, and it's pretty scary.
Is it concerning as well that, although I don't know the latest negotiations, there was rumours that they were going to play in two states, and those two states were Florida and Arizona. And if I'm no good at maths, but apart from the state of Texas, the two places where you wouldn't want to be in case of keeping people away from COVID-19 would be Florida and Arizona.
Yeah, I mean, in their defense, at that time, there was no massive COVID outbreak like there is now in both states. But the fatal flaw in that plan is, I know you guys are in England, but, Arizona's kind of hot. In the summer, I can only speak Fahrenheit, but it was like 40 degrees Celsius, in the summer. Way too damn hot. And so the plan was kind of like always crackpot from the beginning. And, They've really been scrambling. They're off their back foot, essentially, this year, both the players and then the owners, with harebrained schemes, non-good faith negotiations, and none of it bodes well for the state of our supposed national pastime.
The good thing for me, of course, is that this is the longest I've kept up with a season of baseball in my life.
Yeah, you're doing well, Neil. All the way to June. Well done. End of June.
Yes. You're still, June 24th. Your team's still in it, Neil. So, yeah.
And of course, I am tied for the lead in home runs as well.
You are. Yes, you are. I picked you. I put a futures bet on you in March for Neil Dutton to lead Major League Baseball in home runs, and it's paying off so far. I like the position I'm in.
I only hope I can keep the momentum rolling.
Yeah, I'm rooting for the season to be canceled at this point, so maybe I could cash that bet and take it to court and argue that I was correct and that you did technically tie for the major league lead in home runs. So that's kind of what I'm focusing my energies on now, is the upcoming legal case.
In other unusual stories as well, I noticed on Twitter was it last week that you'd only just become aware of the rumor that Paul Weller actually wrote Champagne Supernova.
Well, you have to remember too, not to play up the Britain thing so much, but the Oasis conspiracy theories are a little less prevalent in the United States than they are in the UK. So I have to work a little harder to find fellow Oasis conspiracy theory travelers. But I've always been fascinated by that one. That I don't think he wrote it, but great guest spot.
I was going to say he definitely played on it. He definitely played on it.
He definitely played on it. That's not up for debate. He did play on it. But I think the genius Noel Gallagher wrote the song. But I wouldn't be surprised if Paul Weller wrote it, and it's a hilarious conspiracy theory.
See, the great thing, of course, is about rumours like this, especially now that we have this, this little-known invention called the internet, is that rumours, you can plant the seed of a rumour in the most random way. I mean, the two most famous examples are that someone once wrote that we will eat approximately 8 spiders in our lifetime.
Yeah, remember that one, yeah.
And everyone believes it. But also one that you probably won't know this too much, Patrick, but there was a quiz show host called Bob Holness in this country. Very popular fella. Also, ironically, was the first person to play James Bond. He played him on a radio show, a radio dramatisation of Moonraker on South African radio. But someone started the rumour that he played the saxophone solo on Baker Street.
That's a really good one. I do know Baker Street, by the way, but I don't think it was the first man to play James Bond, probably laying down that sax solo.
No.
I mean, you have to be like Donald Glover, basically, to be that versatile. But I was gonna say, speaking to that, when you search the Champagne Supernova conspiracy theory about Paul Weller writing it, the top results are just message board posts. Not exactly the most. Is that have you talked about that? Is that come up in British musical conversations, amongst Oasis diehards, that Paul Weller didn't write, or that Paul Weller wrote Champagne Supernova, or is this just a thing that
I think it has come up. I think where you go is I think it's with most diehard things, right? Especially Oasis. We've been to multiple. Did you come to all the Oasis concerts, Neil? You came to a couple, right? Yeah, you went to one. We went to 4 or 5 as a group, and it's a strange set of people, right? Especially we're from Liverpool, they're from Manchester. It's a New York Boston thing type idea. So you have to watch it carefully. So they were a hardcore group of people, and now they've become a splinter set where they've had to choose a side, which I don't think they really like. If you're still Oasis, you're probably more Liam. If you've kind of grown up and you're okay that someone plays a kazoo on your song or whatever, then that's kind of that kind of idea. So it's very strange. I think now that the diehard Liam Gallagher fans will absolutely be telling you that Paul Weller wrote that song along with all the others, and possibly that Noel is a robot brought down from space. Do you know that kind of idea? It's a very strange and dark world.
I didn't think about that. That makes a lot of sense. The Liam camp would want to go all in on Paul Weller writing some of the best songs. So if you could place a futures bet on Oasis reuniting, would you bet that they would, or would you bet that they wouldn't?
It's bizarre because I follow Liam on Twitter because it's weird. It's just weird. It's just one line things and
his tweets. They're a trip.
They don't mean anything apart from technically when he's talking about Manchester City. They don't mean anything, and they're always subtweeted at Noel in some way, shape, or form. And then and recently, when the COVID thing started, I think he just thought, let's just get back together, maybe do it in a house or whatever. And I'm assuming Noel gave him the finger, so he went back to subtweeting him again. I think they both don't need each other at the moment. I always think when it comes to reunions, it's usually a money-based conversation. Do I need money? Liam, weirdly, and Noel still sell loads of albums individually. So until they haven't got any money, I can't see them getting back together.
Yeah, it seemed like kind of maybe an irreversible break there. I mean, Liam Gallagher, seemed like probably a fairly difficult person to get along with, and yeah, it seemed like Noel had just had enough. But they've got to. They're brothers. I mean, they will at some point.
You would assume so. Unfortunately, it'd probably be some kind of Rolling Stone vibe where they're both like 74.
Yeah. Hopefully, before their mum, as you would say, dies, it forces them to get back together or something, because the world needs it.
Yes. If we move on to sport in general, rather than 1994 Britpop, which was awesome. That's probably my specialist subject on Mastermind. But you talked briefly about the EPL, as we'll call it. No fans in the stadium. Obviously, there's possibility still that there'll be no fans in the stadium for the NFL. Do you see it in terms of the Premier League? There seems to be a lot less agency, a lot less. I wouldn't say passion's probably not the right word, but it seems a little bit toned down. It's almost like pre-season, I guess. Would you expect to see a similar thing in the NFL? Because the fans, it's a very different kind of noise in a lot of stadia compared to football.
Yeah, I've gotten I haven't watched a ton of the EPL, but I've been coming in and out, and you totally get that vibe that, like when I saw like Liverpool scoring 0 goals, like in their first game back, I'm like, yeah, that's not a very Liverpool type thing. And you understand, I mean, football is a lot like, American football is a lot like British football. There's so much energy comes from the crowd. And I think this has been kind of borne out in European football so far, but I would have to expect the home field advantage is going to be much, much, much less. And if you're going to Lambeau Field and there's no fans, you're going to have to like your odds a lot better if you're the Detroit Lions or the Chicago Bears than you would in a normal game. And I don't know. Football is so visceral and intense, like kind of like inherently, that I don't know if it'll have like a preseason feel amongst the players, I guess, because there's just so much natural. Soccer, it's not like they're standing around. But, you're kind of like, you're not like in each other's faces, the entire game like you are in football. So maybe that won't be as big of a concern in American football, just because inherently if you're hitting each other every play, the juices are going to be flowing. But I do think, without like the crowds, you're not going to be getting like any extra push. The refs aren't going to be intimidated, making calls in your favor. So I do think that home field advantage will be significantly lessened. But yeah, maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think like it'll have kind of that weird preseason feel like some of these soccer games have. Just because when you're literally getting hit in the mouth, it's hard to probably feel like it's the preseason.
You also haven't had 100 days off, I guess, because you will have training camp. If things go well, you'll do it. You'll be in the same thing. What you bring interested on the refs? They did a study, I think it was in Germany. And they usually have the heart rate monitors all the time for all players and the refs, and the heart rate of the refs is considerably lower in the non-stadia games, and they found it. And then stress levels, similar, blood pressure, stuff like that, are also considerably less. Given as what you said, they haven't got 50, 100,000 people wanting ill to happen to them because they've given a decision against their team.
And you just made another interesting point about maybe a difference between the Premier League and the NFL is these Premier League players are coming back to, they were like in the emotional stretch of the season when this all happened. Like they were headed into the home stretch, like where like positions were going to be decided. And now they're coming back after a break, that's longer than the normal off season. And it would have to be weird kind of like coming back to like the stillborn season. Whereas the NFL, at least they have a blank slate. It's going to be a new season. I can't imagine how strange it must be for the soccer players and, for the NBA coming up and the NHL in North America. Like, they were both about to start the playoffs, and now they just have to kind of come back and pick up that intensity again after layoffs that are longer than their normal off seasons. It's just crazy.
So if we assume that the season does actually take place in the NFL, which, I'm beginning to have my doubts, but we'll press on. We'll be positive. There was obviously 5 quarterbacks taken in the first round of the 2018 draft. Now, one of them has won an MVP. One of them has about as much chance of an NFL future as me or Maines. So we come to Baker Mayfield, Josh Allen, and Sam Darnold. Which of those 3 do you think... Which one do you think is most likely to maybe have a Lamar Jackson-type jump? And which one do you think is under the most pressure to actually deliver in 2020?
That's a tough question. There's a lot to unpack there, as they say. I think the answer to both is probably Baker Mayfield. Definitely under the most pressure. And definitely, I still think in the best position to take a jump, just because I still think, even after last year's disaster, he's the most talented of the three. He's the most driven of the three. He probably still has the best supporting cast of the three. And, Sam Darnold might have the most raw, overall, or the most, not raw, the best overall, raw skill set. But he's kind of being set up to fail. He's like in the Sam Bradford diet. He's already on his second coach. Completely remade offensive line. They barely improved their skill core. Just when you don't have a good supporting cast and you don't have coaching continuity, that's like the quickest way to derail a young quarterback's career. Whereas Baker Mayfield, at least, still has a good supporting cast. He does have a new coaching staff, but it's a coach, who's a play action guru. And Kevin Stefanski. Baker Mayfield was weirdly terrible on play action last year. Hopefully someone who can kind of unlock at least the easy plays for Baker Mayfield with play action. And Kevin Stefanski, Baker Mayfield had horrible offensive line issues last year. Kevin Stefanski didn't have a good offensive line in Minnesota, but proved capable of kind of coaching around that. And I still just think Baker has the best overall setup. A lot of people on fantasy Twitter are going to be saying the guy to take the leap forward is going to be Josh Allen. And, he has the more Lamar Jackson-esque skill set. But man, I just don't. I think, coming into the NFL, we knew what the concerns were for Josh Allen, kind of decision-making and accuracy. And I just don't. Last year, I didn't think they looked like concerns anymore. I thought they kind of looked like fatal flaws. After December 1st, he completed fewer than 50% of his passes. He was just stupefyingly bad in the wild card round against the Texans. Just made some of the worst decisions in the biggest moments you will ever see from a quarterback. And I just don't know if he has it. And just kind of on the whole, though, it's kind of looking like a lost draft class, isn't it? I really hope Baker Mayfield can turn around because he's a very non-NFL type personality. NFL quarterbacks do not usually come in speaking their mind this earlier in their career like Baker Mayfield. It's just a very rare NFL personality. So I want him to succeed. I want Sam Darnold to succeed too, but I just feel like he's being set up to fail. And I've been talking for about 6 or 7 straight minutes now, so I'll let you come in with some of your thoughts. But those are kind of my, off the top of my head, writ large thoughts on the 2018 quarterback class.
I just think when it comes to Sam Darnold, it's incredible that every time Adam Gase hasn't had Peyton Manning as his quarterback, his offenses have been absolutely awful. It's almost like there's something about that.
We should do a study on that, Neil. Maybe we can get a doctorate in understanding why crap coaches aren't crap when very good quarterbacks are in charge. I'm sure someone will pay us a lot of money at a university to do that.
Adam Gase is such a weird thing. He's like a kid who he can only focus on what he doesn't have. It seems like all Adam Gase thinks about is during the season is how he's going to make his roster better the following year. He's always seemingly focused on what he doesn't have and not focused on coaching up who he does have. That's just a really quick way to not be a good NFL coach. He's just you got to make do with you've got to make a lemonade out of the lemons they give you, and he just seems incapable of doing that, like you said, unless it's Peyton Manning, which in that case, you do not deserve to be ever employed if you can't have success with Peyton Manning.
I just look at it and think, if you're a quarterback and you get put in the situation that Darnold has been, and then someone calls you in 10 years' time, a draft bust. You're give me a break. Put me in a situation that at least gives me a semblance of a chance to succeed. It's very interesting. You talk about Josh Allen. Is it going to work or whatever? But you can't say that they haven't attempted to put him in the best situation. Regardless, even before last season, he tried to do stuff around him, and this year they've gone and got Stephon Diggs. They're at least attempting to say, okay, well, let's see if Josh can do it, and if he can't, then we'll know because we've given him all the chance we can.
No, absolutely. The Bills are doing it the right way. Like if you draft a quarterback, in like the first round, but especially like the top 10 picks, and then you don't build your entire roster around him, I mean, you're just not doing it right. And like I said, the Bills have given Josh, and it's the same thing. We see the Denver Broncos being so much more aggressive with Drew Lock than the Jets are with Sam Darnold. Like I was stunned to the degree to which the Broncos went all in on Drew Lock's kind of like deep ball skill set this offseason. But, I was very, very happy because Drew Lock was only going to succeed under like a narrow set of circumstances. And the Broncos actually realized it and have tried to give him everything he needs for success, doing what they should be doing. And like when you contrast that with the Jets and what are they doing with Sam Darnold? Like Rashad Perriman is a good, useful NFL player, but he's a role player. He should not be your franchise player's number one wide receiver. It makes no sense. And you just have to feel for Sam Darnold. He's on the Sam Bradford career trajectory where the people around him just kind of can't get out of their own way. And he'll be the one who takes the blame for it when it might not necessarily be his fault.
I just think as well that Broncos offense is going to look so good when they trade for Aaron Rodgers this time next year.
Listen, I went to the University of Missouri and watched every single one of Drew Lock's college starts, and I would be very nervous about building my NFL offense around him. But he is a special deep ball passer, and like he hunts for big plays. So I really give the Denver Broncos credit for if they're going to build around Drew Lock, they are attempting to do it the right way. I would not be shocked, of course, if it still failed, but they're at least giving him the opportunity to succeed, which doesn't sound very complicated, does it? Maybe you should give your quarterback a chance to succeed in the game of American football, but a lot of teams still somehow do not do it.
I'm going to pivot, Neil, because Patrick's given us something there that's good. I'm just interested to work out how Patrick is enjoying his college being moved from the central part of America to the southeast part of America. Because I don't know if you're aware of this, Neil, but they're in what would be called the garbage SEC side of the two divisions, which is good for Missouri most of the time. So how has it been in? Like when they moved, what was everyone's thoughts on the moving from the Big 12 to the SEC? Well, I think they're in the West, right?
We're in the SEC East, actually.
Sorry,
even though we're one of the furthest West teams in the SEC. America loves to do stuff like that. The Big 10 has 14 teams, that kind of thing. We're really good at that kind of stuff in America. I think at the time, people were excited just because the Big 12 seemed to be falling apart. But yeah, in America, Missouri is like the quintessential Midwestern state. Like it is not a Southern state. So we are like a weird cultural fit in the SEC. And we're just a much better cultural fit with like Illinois. We would have been better in the Big 10. So like if the Big 12 was in a class, we should have gone to the Big 10. But you lose. Like look how long it takes to build up like a special rivalry in soccer, and we spent over a century, building up these rivalries in the Big 12. Now all of a sudden, like Arkansas is supposed to be like our number one rival. So I think people have mostly enjoyed it because the SEC is the pinnacle of college football, but there's a lot of people who I think if they could have chosen, I am one of them, would have chosen to keep the Big 12 together. And just, stay in our lane, stay in our region of the country. And because college football, the regionalness is one thing that like makes it special. And now we're just we're like a fish out of water, kind of, not in our region. And it's fun because the competition level is so high. But yeah, we're not in the region we should be.
I think it was Jerry Seinfeld who said that the big issue he had with boxers was you were asking two people to fight with no genuine grievance. So this is like, it's, Arkansas are your rivals now. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. That's like a thing, like the southern part of the state, of Missouri, the Ozarks, but that's not where most of the people do not live there. Most people live in the very, very Midwestern parts of the state of St. Louis and Kansas City. And yeah, we have no grievance with our fellow citizens in Arkansas. Our grievance is with the people in Kansas, who we despise, and the state of Illinois, who we also despise. Not Arkansas, but what you gonna do?
So I guess it'd be remiss of us, Patrick, to have you on the show and not talk about the situation recently in America regarding Black Lives Matter, and I guess we've seen a lot of information from a lot of states, but I'm wondering how it's been in the St. Louis area and what the guest feedback and situation has been since that happened.
Yeah, I mean, the way I knew this was different this time and wasn't just, going to be forgotten about, or like white people just would move on immediately, is because it, for the first time, like, was a thing. So St. Louis, is where this kind of originated in 2014 in Ferguson. But I live in like a lily white suburb of St. Charles, and just we didn't really see any impact from it here in 2014. But this year has been different. We've had demonstrations in our city, very peaceful demonstrations. We've had banners put up all over town. We've had the St. Charles police marching with the protesters, and like it's still kind of going on like a month after the fact. We're not having demonstrations anymore, but like this is actually this time like spilled in to like the suburbs, and it's like just a much wider movement this time with much wider societal acceptance. I mean, there should have been accepted all along, obviously. It's not a controversial message, but this is America. We make everything difficult and controversial. But this time has definitely been different, and I think we're going to actually see finally some real changes and some really enduring positive effects. Because, I was frankly, when I saw the stuff like demonstrations happening in my little suburb, I was frankly shocked because it's a very old, very conservative suburb. And when I saw like the people getting behind it this time, I knew that it was different and just going to be a lot better this time. And there's like stories about that from all over America. Like you'll hear like a town in Nebraska with like 200 people will have like a Black Lives Matter march. So it's just very different. So hopefully some real positive comes out of all this.
Fantastic. Good news. Good news indeed. I'd like to think that we would be the same, although I think the UK is doing a hold my beer moment on American controversy on the moment when it comes to this kind of situation. So unfortunately,
America has been exporting. We're exporting a lot of our bad habits, I feel like, to the UK over like the past 10 years.
I think we had them. We sent them to you. You've used them and you've sent them back. Thanks. We really appreciate it. Said no one ever.
It's like this really circular thing, isn't it?
But there you go.
Our COVID responses, our populist politics. Although even your guys' COVID response is making ours. We're making yours look brilliant. Basically, it is not going well here.
No, it's not. But
I'm slightly worried about football in the fall because you got Texas and California, which have like 5 or 6 teams between them, and Florida. That's like a third of the league. Those 3 states basically having like uncontrolled spread of COVID-19 right now. Not a good situation.
No.
But don't worry, we got it under control. All of our politicians are taking it very seriously, and they've got it under control. That is sarcasm.
Of course.
For those who don't know, for everybody who are unaware, that was absolutely sarcasm.
Do you have any listeners unfamiliar with me? That was sarcasm. Yeah, you know what? Hopefully England, America, hopefully we all come out of our trials and tribulations these past few decades stronger, smarter, and healthier. We usually do. Both the UK and America have a long tendency of having horrible problems, but then eventually fixing them and then kind of moving on to the next one. So hopefully we will emerge stronger peoples from this.
Yeah, let's hope so.
There will always be a next one.
Yeah.
Wasn't it? It's a phrase about America, I think, that America will always do the right thing once every other option has been exhausted. So that's kind of where we're at here.
Excellent. Well, Patrick, as always, a pleasure to speak to you. We're honoured that you still speak to us now you're famous, and that's really an honour, obviously. So brilliant. Enjoy the rest of your day in St. Louis. I hope you get baseball soon, and we'll speak to you soon.
I hope we get baseball soon. Good luck to the Liverpool, And always my pleasure. Thank you, guys.